You're an American citizen.
Yeah.
And you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans? You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's capital.
Stephen A. Smith just delivered another blistering critique of the Democratic Party, and this one cuts deep. His argument centers on a simple question. How do Americans react when they feel pushed to the back of the line in their own country? When voices like Stephen A. and Bill Maher start calling out their own side, it signals something bigger is happening.
I think that there were 2 officers who were facing lacerations on their face.
All for prosecution of those who pelted them?
Look, I've seen the videos of this snowball fight. I think that it was a snowball fight.
A snowball fight or assaulting cops?
I think it's a combination of both. They're law enforcement. They're not engaging in a snowball fight with you. They don't want to be bothered. If they're law enforcement and that's not something that they were entertaining, then assault would be the way to go. Now, obviously, if you just hit them with some sort of snowball or whatever the case may be, I mean, you didn't harm them or anything. That's entirely different. So there's different levels of assault. But nevertheless,
well, you're not harmed until you're harmed.
But nevertheless, exactly, the act is the act itself, and the law enforcement wasn't capitulating to that kind of situation. Then we have to take that into consideration. And if they felt it was assault, then damn it was assault, plain and simple. But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office.
The controversy began with a snowstorm incident in New York. What started as a snowball fight escalated when NYPD officers were reportedly injured. When asked whether charges should follow, Mayor Mamdani downplayed it as harmless fun. But critics argue once officers are targeted and hurt, it stops being playful and becomes assault.
But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office. When you listen to some of his rhetoric in the past, some of the things that he had said about the police didn't seem to be that keen on being supportive about them. I don't recall whether or not he was talking about defunding police, but I believe. I believe he did say that. I believe he did say that. So because that's a reality. You know, when you see that kind of stuff, it sort of seems dismissive about concerns for law enforcement. And that is not a good position for him to be in, particularly when they're not getting raises or anything like that, because you don't have the money to take care of them, nor did you appear inclined to do so even if you did. So all of those things definitely work against him. And that's the kind of thing that can turn officers against you. And with all the problems that New Yorkers have.
Stephen A. pointed out that Mamdani had previously supported rhetoric about defunding the police. So when he dismissed the incident, it reinforced concerns about where he stands on law enforcement. In a city already wrestling with public safety debates, appearing indifferent toward injured officers sends a risky message.
Did you see this AOC Mamdani video in Spanish?
Hola.
Mi español no es el mejor.
No te preocupes, alcalde. Si su hijo o hija está cumpliendo 3 o 4 años en el 2026, usted puede registrarlos gratis en el programa Kinder 3 o Prekinder de la ciudad de Nueva York. Pero debe registrarse el 27 de febrero, que es la fecha límite. Cualquier padre de la familia de la ciudad de Nueva York, sin importar su ocupación, ingreso o estatus migratorio, es elegible para registrar a su
child care for all, meaning illegals. So they are talking about illegals, number one. Now, we live in Miami. We're in Miami right now. I hear more Spanish than English outside of this studio basically all day long. So I don't have a problem with Spanish or Spanish speakers. However, speaking in another language while encouraging people who are not legal citizens to get city services, that seems a bit much for me.
The broader issue, Stephen A. argues, is consistency. Leadership requires clarity. If you campaign on skepticism toward policing, then minimize incidents involving officers voters notice. And that perception can erode trust, not just among police but among everyday citizens who want stability and order.
Can't knock that. What I would tell you is that if you're trying to cater to that particular audience, speaking their language doesn't hurt. So that's not a crime. You know, they're voted. There are folks in the Hispanic community that are voting, and when you talk in their language, it makes them a bit more receptive to you in terms of wanting to listen to what you have to say. I mean, what parent doesn't want, you know, free preschool for 3-4-year-olds, et cetera, et cetera. But I always harken back, and it's very important that I bring this up, because I remember when some people asked me, when you became so moderate, somewhat of a centrist per se, when did that happen for you? And I can't remember the year, but I remember when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were in office. And I never forget, as long as I live, a reporter was talking, Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States, God rest his soul, he was talking to him about the polls were showing blah, 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 blah. He looked at the reporter and said, "So?" And I was eating my cereal. I was like, what? What did he say? Because I had never seen it. I had never.
Then the conversation shifts to immigration and sanctuary policies. Critics argue that when American citizens believe they are being placed behind undocumented migrants in access to services, frustration builds quickly. Whether fully accurate or not, the perception alone can fuel resentment and political backlash.
Seen a vice president do that before. The president, he said, "So?" And then he said, "You didn't elect us to follow your lead. You elected us to lead, to do what we believe is in the best interest of this country." And that's exactly what we're doing. And then the reporter elaborated a little bit about something with Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. And she tried to accuse him of being against that. He said, "I'm not against that at all. I'm against you asking the government to pay for it." And all of a sudden, it opened my eyes and reminded me what all of this is really, really about. Most people in this country have a live and let live attitude. Live your life, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the uproar about?
Yeah.
Stephen A.'s point isn't about language or outreach. He even acknowledged that speaking Spanish to voters makes political sense. His concern is about policy priorities. When taxpayers feel their contributions are being stretched while systems are already strained, they demand answers.
What is about the fact that you're going into the pockets of the American people and asking them to subsidize it. And when you do that, now you've got them up in a tizzy.
Yep.
Because you're saying this is where your taxpayer dollars is going to. And when that happens, all of a sudden, that gives everybody the right to speak up and say, wait a damn minute here. How is that possible? I know of a young lady that's a friend of mine that got in a car accident in LA. And literally needed to be treated, etc. And her bill was very, very exorbitant when she got treated at the emergency room and stuff like that. And she was trying to get on the phone, get some assistance, etc., etc. They literally told her, if you were a migrant, it would be easier to take care of you. But the problem is that you're an American citizen, so you have to wait in line.
He shared a broader political awakening moment, recalling when leaders like Dick Cheney argued that elected officials are chosen to lead, not simply follow polls. That perspective shifted his thinking. Leadership, in his view, means making tough calls rooted in principle, not reacting to every wave of public pressure.
Have a wallet.
You're an American citizen.
Yeah.
And you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans?
Stephen A. believes Democrats risk appearing reactive rather than decisive. When policies seem shaped by appeasing progressive factions instead of maintaining balance, moderate voters drift away. Elections are often decided by the middle, not the extremes.
I don't care what city you're in. I don't care what state you're in. Basically, what nation you're from. If you are a native of that country and you're being told you have to wait because they're favoring somebody who's not a native, who crossed the border illegally, you're going to have a problem with that, no matter who you are or where you're from. So understanding those kind of things is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about common sense.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump built his brand around a clear message: America first. That clarity resonated with voters who felt overlooked. Regardless of whether one agrees with his approach, the message was simple and consistent. Prioritize citizens, secure borders, protect national interests.
You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's capital.
In the end, this debate isn't just about snowballs, sanctuary cities, or party loyalty. It's about perception, fairness, and leadership. When voters feel ignored or sidelined, they respond at the ballot box. Stephen A.'s warning is clear. If Democrats don't recalibrate toward common sense balance, the political consequences could be significant.